Welcome back to another episode of the Corporate Cowboys Podcast. I'm your host, Alex. This is Season 7, Episode 4 of the Corporate Cowboys Podcast, and we continue reading The Naked Corporation, How the Age of Transparency Will Revolutionize Business. The authors of this are Don Tapscott and David Ticoll. Now, Chapter 4 is inside of part 2 of this book. You see, this book is divided into parts, right? I don't know, maybe they wanted to be extra fancy, but part 1 was chapters 1 through 3. Part 2 was chapters 4 through 8. And part 3 are chapters 9 and 10. Now, we're going to begin with chapter 2. Oh, and if I didn't mention, yes, the book was published 2002 by Free Press. And as I read, I will be providing some commentary, but I will try not to make it too intrusive, as you will. So the book will flow, and this audiobook is worthwhile to you. Otherwise, it will just be me ranting about how corporate is either as naked as this book makes it out to seem, or still veiled, wearing, I don't know, lingerie, something sexy. Now, chapter 4 begins, and the title of this is called, part 2 is called When Stakeholders Can See. When Stakeholders Can See. Chapter 4 is titled Whistleblowers and Other Employees. Sounds interesting. Let's begin. Transparency for employees has come a long way, especially compared with the days after World War II. Conflict between management and labor soared. The 12-month period after VJ Day saw 4,630 work stoppages involving 5 million strikers and 120 million days of lost work. One of the more memorable management-labor confrontations, the largest in U.S. history, was the 1945 strike by 320,000 members of the United Auto Workers, that's UAW, against the nation's biggest company, General Motors. UAW leader Walter Reuther insisted that GM could afford to increase wages without increasing prices and demanded it be more transparent about its finances. He challenged GM to, quote, open the books and prove him wrong. This audacious behavior from a mainstream union incensed GM management. It means it got them mad. It means it ticked them off. It ground their gears. GM Vice President Harry W. Anderson told UAW negotiators that under no circumstances would the corporation reveal its records. He exclaimed, "We don't even open our books to our stockholders!" Exclamation point. Essentially, he's telling them to take his message of opening books and transparency and shove it. The next little subheading here is called The Knowledge Worker. Today's open enterprises provide employees access to a vast amount of information about the firm and its management. They build trust with employees through openness and ethical values. Transparency and values begin at home. The surest indicator of how a firm treats customers, shareholders, partners, and other stakeholders is how it treats its employees. Wearing your employee hat, you now have unprecedented access to information about your employer. Some of this you don't need to know, such as the love life, salary, or work behavior of someone else's boss. I mean, it helps. Side note, it helps. The sooner you learn people, the sooner you learn to navigate corporate. I mean, some folks call it office politics. Some folks claim it's kissing ass and ass grabbing, right? But if you have to kiss ass too much, if you have to grab ass too much, you're doing too much. Corporate isn't all about that. And people can see right through your intentions when you do it too much. It becomes unprofessional. It really does, and it shows. Now, a plethora of irrelevant, albeit juicy, information previously inaccessible is now readily available at the speed of light due to email and other technological innovations. Lots of useful information is available too. You can evaluate your job security by investigating your company's financial position, the current performance of your group, or your own performance, and most firms make this information available. You can strengthen your bargaining power in salary negotiations by knowing more about what your peers, both within and outside of the company, are making. You can decide if your company is a good place to invest your intellectual capital by evaluating corporate values and senior management behavior. It is in your company's interest to be open with you about many things. The idea of transparency in the workplace is relatively new. Social scientists, organizational learning aficionados, and human resource management experts have mused for decades about how new work models require openness and freely flowing information. I would be classified in that category of social scientists and aficionados and experts as far as human resource management goes. I actually majored in undergrad for organizational studies, essentially learning the dynamics of hierarchical structures, of hierarchical formation, and how power and information travels to and from layers in hierarchies and across hierarchies. I always found that to be a very interesting and intriguing appeal of corporate, and it made me want to study. It made me learn more about why some corporations are perceived to be slow moving whales when it comes to information and innovation in markets, and others seem to be so agile, so quick, and so nimble to affect change across their organization and their culture. It really is something to marvel at. But shit, I might just be a nerd, right? Continuing, the modern corporation requires internal transparency because it is essential for effective knowledge work. Employees must share and use new knowledge, must be empowered to take responsibility for it, and must be self-motivated. Most firms need highly visible values, strategy, business processes, and operations for workers to collaborate and work effectively. The next little subheading here is transparency and knowledge work. In the old corporation, information flowed vertically. People were separated into two groups, the governors and the governed. The supreme commander was at one end of the spectrum and the permanently governed at the other. Information flowed imperfectly, at best, from top to bottom. In the old industrial economy, the vast majority of those who worked for large vertically integrated companies contributed brawn, not brain. Management invested in big factories with production processes and sophisticated machinery that required little decision making or operator skill. Employees were extension of the machine. Immigrant workers in Ford factories spoke 50 different languages and had little education. They were expected to follow orders and not to take much initiative, if any. Theirs was not to question why. Management was based on mistrust, command, and control, and its decision processes were totally opaque to employees. Yeah, this is true. This is very true. And a lot of modern day managers really believe themselves to be bosses, really believe that they don't need their employees to be knowledgeable, that they don't need their employees to be intellectual, that they don't need their employees to be smart, to be active, to take initiative. But when you move from the industrial setting, what is the factory, what is the assembly line, right? When you move from that and you involve more people, more aspects of human interaction, like sales, like service, like account management, right? business to business enterprising, that that involves more human interaction in the equation. So when the requirement for information and its access, its sharing, its distribution and collaboration, when that becomes priority, management doesn't need to know that it's a priority. It is a priority. It behooves management to be competent enough to recognize this as a priority and not hamstring the employees, not tie the labor force, not tie their hands, not tie the labor force's hands behind their back, not handcuff them unduly, not restrain them prematurely, because you'd be surprised if you inform your workforce with a common goal, a a productive vision, something sustainable, something worthwhile, something righteous. It doesn't matter how many different languages they speak, what type of culture they come from, but if you can establish common ground, that's 50 different markets you open up. Continuing, things weren't much better in the white collar world. The goal was to climb the ladder and acquire more direct reports. For those outside management, the incentive was salary. The work goals were established higher up. This was the world of the organization man. By contrast, modern companies are fluid and supple. Many workers change their processes often and must continuously learn and adapt as they work. Consider a job as mundane as working in a call center. Every hour, customers raise new questions and issues. The flexible corporate structure is more effective, but it also means that yesterday's yes-no decisions have become multiple choice questions. To do their jobs effectively, workers require knowledge. Google, as a private corporation, can share more information with employees than a publicly traded firm, including financials, deals in the making, and ongoing problems, says CEO Eric Schmidt. Quote, most companies use employee portals as an HR mechanism. Here are your benefits, here are your vacation days, and so forth. That is the classic view, and it is the wrong view. The right view is how you can spread information within the company that causes employees to solve problems without any executives needing to deal with them. Sort of a work minimization strategy for executives. They're happier and I'm happier. End quote. You see, when you give your employees a little more agency, a little more knowledge on how the business run, on how to take care of business, business takes care of itself. It's obvious. It's almost a logical no-brainer, almost. And yet still some modern day managers and executives, they hold on to every bit of power, every bit of information, the knowledge. They hold it. They not only withhold it from the employees, but they hold it over them. They lord it over them. I don't know if it's an ego trip, if they let the power get to their heads or what have you, but it isn't power. It is not power if you're the only one that can exercise it. Why? Why? Because then you bottleneck business. You bottleneck business only to you as a point of contact. And so the business won't grow and the stress will mount. You will not be able to handle every aspect, every angle of business that comes your way. And then you dig yourself a hole. You paint yourself into a corner, believing the delusion, believing, rationalizing that your employees are stupid, they don't get anything done, and they, quote, only bring you problems. They never come up with solutions. I've heard it all before. I've heard it all before, especially when managers who really think they're hot shit, they say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. Fuck all that noise, man. Continuing. Consider It says, oh, no, the end quote here, that they're happier and I'm happier. And it says, rather than knowledge management, Google's practice is more akin to knowledge liberation, the release of previously secret information to all employees. Consider how modern corporations deal with something as seemingly infinite as product knowledge. The IBM mainframe salesperson circa 1970 knew about the features and functions of the company's products in great detail, but almost nothing about the firm's product strategy. IBM never, quote, pre-announced products. The IBM account representative's job was to sell existing products, the more the better, and keep the competition out. The salesperson had no more knowledge about where the company was headed than did the customer, nor did he need to. Technology was stable, and fundamental changes to product strategy were rare. Customer requirements were generally straightforward. The salesperson delivered 85% gross margins on mainframe sales, enabling IBM to bundle extensive service and support with the product. Today, by contrast, the salesperson works in a volatile environment where customers have access to information about any competitor. Technology changes daily, as does the customer organization. The account manager needs to thoroughly understand IBM's business strategy, future directions, and views on emerging technology architectures to help customers plan and implement sophisticated technology applications. Today, IBM is far more candid in discussing these critical issues with employees who in turn release this information to the marketplace. Though competitors know more about the company's strategy, the gain from empowering its own employees is worth it to IBM. The new salesperson needs much more than product information. Because he will not have a specific answer for every question, he needs a deep comprehension of IBM's architectural directions, philosophy, and principles. Often tricky issues arise regarding partnering with competitors, politics within the customer firm, media comments about IBM and stakeholder actions against it, or recent corporate disclosures. The salesperson needs to have the company's philosophy and values in his bones to say and do the right thing. No policy manual can cover every contingency. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, when you inform your employees, you make soldiers out of them. You make agents. They're not free agents, they're your agents, and they're informed. They're soldiers. They become mercenaries, damn near. They become independent contractors without being independent contractors. And they have that trust as employees. They have that trust in you as a manager, as a leader of the organization. And they'll call you boss. They will call you boss out of respect. Continuing, frequent and erratic shifts in core strategy have gone the way of the dot-com dodo. But thanks to continuing rapid-paced technology, innovation, and the pressure to entice ever more fickle consumers, competitive product cycles are as demanding as they have ever been. Managers must make more difficult decisions in less time. A decade ago, automakers took 5 to 6 years to bring a new car to market. Now, it's usually 3 years, sometimes less than 2, and soon 1. Rather than stockpile cars on dealer lots, automakers want to build a car within a week to a buyer's specifications and deliver it to her driveway. In consumer electronics, product cycles are measured in months. Even in the food industry, the pace continues to pick up. Have you checked out the tomato section of your local grocery lately, let alone frozen pizzas? Producers of virtually all consumer goods and services face the twin threats of compressed development time and shorter shelf life. Peter Senge was right when he argued that an organization remains competitive only if it learns faster than its competitors. Any firm can have the same technology as another. Any product can be copied. Competitive advantage is ephemeral as firms constantly seek new ways to create value. Marketplace success hinges on the knowledge and creative genius of product strategists, developers, and marketers. General Electric. Sorry, I fumbled that, so I gotta pronounce it correctly, right? I gotta enunciate every little syllable and consonant. General Electric takes knowledge sharing seriously, applying unique ways to encourage this behavior. Steve Kerr, GE's former chief knowledge officer, says that many 1990s company meetings began with a round the table discussion where every attendee was asked to share something important he or she had learned. Quote, "You would be fired if you took company assets like money and hoarded them in your personal bank account. Similarly, if you hoarded information or ideas in your personal bank account, you could be fired as well. Hoarding information is an integrity violation." That's nice. That's nice. What's up with the 100 mile to the gallon carburetor? Where the fuck did that go? Why is that not in the marketplace? Like we could have just innovate on gasoline instead of fucking pumping up the price, right? Cocksuckers. The next subheading: transparency and executives. Corporate secrets occur when executives know something that employees don't. Blind spots occur when employees know something that executives don't. Knowledge liberation is about making the unknown known to both executives and employees. Microsoft.com General Manager Tim Sinclair supports an open enterprise. Since 1994, he has held one of the most challenging jobs anywhere, running the third largest website in the world. When he started out, the entire site ran on a single server that handled 1 million hits a day. As the internet expanded, more groups at Microsoft added content. Today, more than 500 writers and developers in more than 70 locations around the world provide information for the Microsoft website. 5 data centers manage its online traffic. Microsoft.com is the only corporate web presence in the top 100, boasting 20 million page views per day and 5.5 million users per day. Along with the sites of the CIA and the FBI, it is one of the top targets for hackers. They itch to crack its security and embarrass the world's largest software company. Incredibly, Sinclair has managed a reliability score consistently in the top 3 on the web today. 99.78% uptime. When asked how he orchestrates the human capital to achieve such success, his mantra is transparency. Quote, "When there is good news, everyone knows. When there is bad news, tell everyone." If there is a problem with the system, if Tim has made a mistake, if his team is not performing well, rather than keep it a secret, he lets appropriate people in Microsoft outside his group know about it, including his boss. "When I open up," this is in quotes, "when I open up with the bad news, I get the support and resources I need." Tim says that at first this was counterintuitive, and it made his division look weak. Yet, quote, "rather than making me vulnerable, this philosophy of transparency strengthens me and my organization. People trust us because they know we're open and determined to deliver." I can appreciate that. Just a side note, I can appreciate that if you're open. If you're open with the vulnerabilities that exist, not just in your division, but how it relates to the entire organization. I mean, bro, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? You will get the resources, you will get the support necessary in order to bolster your division, to rectify those vulnerabilities and create opportunities from perceived weakness, right? And it makes the team stronger. It makes the entire organization better for it. Tim is not alone. Continuing, Tim is not alone. Firms like Johnson & Johnson and Seagate have adopted open book management policies where they share in real time the company's scorecard with employees and engage them in its development and in the attainment of its goals. Any employee of Seagate Systems can use the corporate intranet to see CEO Bill Watkins' objectives and how he is performing to achieve them. IBM has a scorecard on its intranet which captures internal metrics and how employees and departments measure up. It receives more traffic than any other part of the intranet. The next little subheading here reads, transparency and trust within the firm. Open enterprises foster employee trust toward the firm. They also foster trust within the firm among employees. Samuel Johnson said, where secrecy or mystery begins, vice or roguery is not far off. Damn, this Samuel Johnson guy sounds base as fuck. I'm going to repeat that again. Where secrecy or mystery begins, vice or roguery is not far off. I like that. I really do. Knowledge workers, by definition, are not stupid. They know that the fewer secrets executives have, the more likely they can be trusted. Firms cannot be transparent unless they are trustworthy, or openness will harm them. Firms that are trustworthy can and should be transparent because openness helps stakeholders verify honesty, reliability, and consideration. Opacity causes dysfunctional behavior within firms. A Xerox manager told us of an expression prevalent in the company in the early 1990s called, quote, grin fucking. Grin fucking. When certain mistrusted executives said things that subordinates thought were wrong or even ridiculous, rather than openly challenge the statements, employees just grinned back. Peer executives often treated one another the same way. That's just being a yes man, really. I mean, if you don't have the fucking balls and backbone to stand up to your executive, to your manager, when they're shitting the bed, right? You just smile and nod, right? And fucking smile and nod, and that's what that means. Grin fucking. Yeah, you're fucking them back by grinning, right? It's like you're metaphorically sucking them off just by grinning and agreeing with them, right? If you don't have the muster to do that, I mean, you're going to be in for a very bumpy ride, and they're going to be not riding their coattails as much as them dragging you along. So fucking buckle up, right? Strap in. All right, continuing. In 1998, Arthur Andersen told senior audit partners to implement its 2X strategy. That's bring in twice as much revenue from non-audit as from audit services. Then the firm increased the power of local office managing partners, each with his own revenue targets and balance sheets. It eviscerated the Central Professional Standards Group, a panel of internal experts who handled tricky accounting questions, moving many of its members to local offices. The goal was to make it harder for auditors to deter clients from pushing the envelope on accounting standards. Enron became Andersen's most powerful client for both audit and consulting services. I'm laughing because, I mean, Andersen today, is really eating out the gutter. Not literally, but figuratively. I mean, they're still trying to recuperate their image, trying to rehabilitate their image from having slept in Enron's bed, right? Actually having made out Enron's bed, and they slept in it together. That's funny as shit. If you don't know about Enron, I mean, I'm not going to waste your time explaining it. You have the power of the internet, literally. If not in your hand, it could be in your fucking brain at this point. I mean, we're in 2023. I know what's his face is doing what's that thing by putting that thing in your brain, but I mean, just use the net. Use the net, look it up, you'll see what I'm talking about when it comes to Enron and Anderson's. Enron became Anderson's most powerful client for both audit and consulting services. A Houston-based member of the professional standards group, Carl Bass, complained in a December 1999 email to a colleague in Chicago that his advice that Enron take a $30 million to $50 million accounting charge for a specific transaction was being ignored. 4 months later, he was removed from his Enron oversight role in response to complaints by Enron's chief accounting officer at the time, Richard A. Causey. One former Anderson employee told us that in classes at the Anderson training facility in Chicago, if a student raised the problem or failing of Anderson in the past, teachers were known to reply, "The past does not exist." Discussing problems from the past was prohibited, a big problem as those who fail to learn from history are destined to repeat it. Well, continuing. I mean, that's just too funny. That's poetic justice, if you will. In both Xerox and Anderson, a culture of uniformity and opacity undermined open discussion, free thinking, and challenges to the status quo. A disastrous result. With disastrous results. When opacity reigns, organizational cultures include negativism, withdrawal, conformity, low commitment, risk aversion, lack of learning, organizational politics, defensiveness, and other symptoms not rooted in positive values. Conversely, in open enterprises, employees are engaged. There is greater loyalty and lower turnover, and employees are more likely to do the right thing. Employees in open and trusted firms are better motivated. Knowledge workers need to be fully motivated to succeed. Unlike an assembly line where one can turn up the speed, management can't simply demand 15 more bright ideas per month. But if we list the factors motivating workers, money is not the most important. It is concepts like mutual trust, respect, learning, ability to contribute, and to see the big picture. I'm fucking telling you, these little side comments here, I'm fucking telling you, inform your employees the right way, right? You allow them to contribute, to collaborate, right? To pitch a little insight, to take the initiative, and they'll treat you like a boss. You won't have to fucking claim it. You won't have to proclaim like a self-proclaimed boss and you're just a fucking piece of shit with delusions of grandeur, right? No, they'll call you and they'll shout you out. They'll shout you out as a boss. You just have to act the part. Continuing, Michael Rice is working hard to create an open enterprise. As executive director of the private client group at Prudential Securities, he is responsible for most of the company's business. In 2000, the company shut down its institutional and equity markets businesses. Today, all its research is on behalf of private clients, eliminating the conflict of interest problems that other securities firms face. The 8,000 people in Rice's group generate $2 billion in annual revenue from more than 2 million clients and manage $120 billion of assets. Prudential has constructed a, quote, transparency architecture to ensure an open spirit with stakeholders, from clients to regulators to stock exchanges. Rice says they seek to, quote, live by the spirit, not just by the letter of the law. The company, quote, opens the kimono completely to employees, providing financial advisors, FAs, complete access to information about company strategies, financials, and operations. This is done via the corporate intranet and other communications tools, and also through an FA advisory council consisting of 2 FAs from each of 10 regions. At, at FA meetings, Rice reviews financial results in detail and discusses any issue. As first as it as oh, this is a typo. Okay, I was about to say, yo, am I having a stroke? At first, it was a food fight, he says, but soon people realized we were serious about being open. Now we know more about the company, our problems, why we do things, how we make decisions than I could have ever imagined. The process was extended to a branch manager advisory council that discusses issues ranging from strategy and operating style to communications and products. The branches went from being outposts to being actively engaged in the company. The transparency architecture resulted in engagement and loyalty. Rice says that in every organization he's seen, most employees think the home office doesn't get it. This was a situation at Prudential in the early 1990s. With a number of severe problems, the company had completely fractured trust. Today, he says, we have a culture of trust, and that pays off. The firm is aligned around a clear strategy that employees co-create. Loyalty has shot up. Prior to January of 2000, the firm's annual attrition rate was 23%. God damn, that's high. That's a fucking revolving door. In 2002, it was 11%. Okay. Dropping at a time when the firm cut FA compensation twice, laid off thousands of people, and reduced costs by $250 million in order to stay alive. People knew our financial situation. This is in quotes. People knew our financial situations. We were always very upfront about it. His advice is, quote, tell the truth, tell the whole story, answer any question honestly and candidly. Do what you say you will. This is what builds trust and goodwill. Rice says that today the only gap between the field and home office is a geographical one. When the firm begins to grow again, he believes that a reputation of openness will attract the best and brightest. I can't express the power of transparency, he says. Well, when you're open and transparent, folks have trust in you, right? So much so that folks will also try to take advantage of your openness, of your trust, right? Now, there is a past episode that I call the first half of self-sabotage, and I believe it's in season 3? It might be season 3 or 2. It's the first half of self-sabotage, the goal in life, in corporate, as a corporate cowboy. Regardless of what projects you got going on, regardless of what your objectives, what your pipe dreams might be, the goal, the motivation should be to set yourself up as if you were setting yourself up. Let me repeat that. The goal, the mission, is to set yourself up as if you were setting yourself up. And you'll recognize that you're never done, right? But that's the goal. It's to set yourself up as if you were setting yourself up. What I mean by that is make yourself look good. Make yourself look good. not in the superficial sense, right? Not in the superficial sense that's only, you know, skin deep and paper thin, right? Don't do that. You want your network to be founded on trust to the point that should the second half of self-sabotage take effect, it won't be, and it's not by your hand, because I mean this shit happens. You garner too much attention, you gain too much limelight, right? Too much favor in some people's eyes. There's always going to be snakes. There's always going to be somebody bigger, somebody badder. You do what you can. You be the fittest, right? You do what you can to become the fittest, but somebody's always going to try and snake your ass, right? When that happens, though, you want your network to react for you. You don't even have to make a move. You want people asking you. I mean, if you're still around, right? If you're still kicking, you want people asking you, Alex, you want me to take them out? See, that's trust. That's power. Doesn't matter how much money you make. Numerous studies. I mean, that is the power of transparency. Numerous studies have shown that collegial trust and social capital are crucial for high performance. A culture of openness and trust drops internal transaction costs in 3 areas. First, an open culture reduces search costs, the costs of finding the right people and resources. Recommendations are made more often. Recommendations are made more often and considered more carefully among trusted parties. Yeah, when you trust somebody, you'll take their word for some things. You'll come to them because you trust them, and you will take their word for some things. Second, an open culture reduces coordination and collaboration costs, as trust is the foundation of effective collaboration. Teams that lack trust are usually ineffective. Trust oils the mechanisms of collaboration, the mechanisms for collaboration, reducing friction or breakdown. Third, trust reduces contracting costs, eliminating the need for formal agreements, contracts, and resolution/litigation procedures. A handshake, even a wink, can speak volumes more than an elaborate document. A handshake, even a wink, can speak volumes more than an elaborate document. And few documents anticipate all possible permutations of a relationship. Yeah, yeah, man. It's something to reckon with. Really, it's something to behold. The power that comes from trust, that comes from transparency, that comes from social knowledge. Essentially, it's being a professional. It's being a corporate cowboy where you can communicate with others through a handshake, through just a look, through a wink, like the book says. It's awesome. It's something to behold. Conversely, office politics, turf battles, and other games people play that undermine performance proliferate in a culture of mistrust. Openness is the antibiotic for such bacteria. As far back as 1990, Peter Senge wrote in The Fifth Discipline that transparency can reduce office politics and game playing. And here's a block quote from that. A non-political climate demands, quote, openness, both the norm of speaking openly and honestly about important issues and the capacity to continually challenge one's own thinking. The first might be called participative openness, the second, reflective openness. Without openness, it is generally impossible to break down the game playing that is deeply embedded in most organizations. And a side comment here, I would venture to guess that this culture of mistrust continues. I mean, why else would we be in a corporate war? Why else would corporate war even be a thing? if there wasn't two sides to this coin. There's the openness side, and then there's the opaque, the opacity side. There's the transparency and the opacity sides. And they both play on each other. I mean, all things are fair in love and war. Am I right? Games, continuing, games, real games, that is, can reveal a lot about the games people play in life. We have been advising a startup that has developed an online game called Office Politics that simulates and satirizes the antics of employees who try to climb the executive ladder. The game provides players with various devices and tools to, quote, kiss ass, backstab, hire, and fire your way to the top. Since it's only a game with few real-world consequences and online players who don't necessarily even know each other personally, you might expect that nasty, underhanded behavior would prevail. On the contrary, one winner's description of his secret to success is typical: making friends and alliances and playing a relatively clean game. Transparency and trust within the Let me just, a side comment on that game, right? Because I think this is the only time it even talks about it. But that game, the game of life, this corporate game, this corporate war, climbing the corporate ladder, being a corporate cowboy is essentially that. It's incorporating other associates, making alliances, and playing a relatively clean game, right? There's a pretty popular quote out there floating around. I know who said it. I mean, it comes from a movie. And if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you've seen Scarface. I've never fucked anyone in my life who didn't have it coming to them. What that means, essentially, is someone who has it coming to them, then you ought to give it to them. You must. You must give it to them, right? If they're a snake to you first, you don't wait to get fired. You don't wait to feel the heat, to feel the consequences. You take them out completely. I mean, politically, corporately, professionally. Continuing. Transparency and trust within the workplace also change the customer experience. At Prudential Securities, in 1 minute, an FA might be asked to explain the tricky issues regarding disclosure and conflict of interest in his industry and company. He might need to explain the rationale for Prudential's controversial decision to withdraw from investment banking. The next minute, a client might wonder why Prudential has a national account center for small accounts $25,000 or less, asking if this is a step toward elimination of its branches. And when an important client asks why his niece was forced to deal with the National Account Center, the FA has the knowledge of corporate strategy on wealth management and the savvy to rectify the situation on the spot. As with all stakeholders, transparency, if handled right, leads to trust that leads to relationships and value. Every year since 1983, the Great Place to Work Institute has cataloged the top 100 employers in the United States. The program is so popular that the Institute now collaborates with various publications to produce lists for more than 8 countries, and as of 2003, identified the best companies in each of 15 European Union countries as well. The Institute defines a great place to work as one where you trust the people you work for, have pride in what you do, and enjoy the people you work with. The Institute argues that corporations should strive to be great places to work, not because of some warm and fuzzy notion of employees being happy and coddled, but because this is the surest way for a company to be as profitable as possible. Institute research shows that companies that are a great sorry, Institute research shows that companies that are great to work for capture a host of competitive advantages. A mutual fund comprising only companies from the Institute's Great Place to Work list would consistently and substantially outperform the market. These companies benefit from factors such as lower turnover, lower healthcare premiums, and more job applications. Any company with more than 1,000 employees that has been in business for more than 7 years can apply to be designated as a great place to work. In 2002, a total of 279 applied, and hundreds of employees in each firm filled out questionnaires about their feelings toward the company. Sample statements sample statements sample statements employees were asked to agree or disagree with were, and these are the sample statements. I'll list them off for you. The first is, management keeps me informed about important issues and changes. The second is, people around here are given a lot of responsibility. The third statement, management involves people in decisions that affect their jobs or work environment. And the fourth statement, I am offering training. Oh, I am offered training and development to further myself professionally. That last one sounds like a dream come true. I mean, if management went out of its way to develop you professionally, it's because they want you on long term. It's because they're investing in you, not just as a human, but as something more. It's as a person. The Institute says that trust between managers and employees is the most telling characteristics of the best workplaces. To assess a company's level of trust, the Institute looks at three dimensions: credibility, respect, and fairness. Credibility, credibility concerns an employee's perceptions of management, communication practices, competence, and integrity. Respect examines the support, collaboration, and caring employees see expressed by management's actions toward them. Fairness concerns the equity, impartiality, and justice employees perceive in the workplace. The final two dimensions in the Institute's model relate to workplace relationships between employees and their job or company. That's pride. And among employees or other employees. That's camaraderie. Pride is the feelings employees have toward the job, team, or work group and company, and camaraderie is the quality of hospitality, intimacy, and community within the workplace. Great places to work retain their luster even during bad times. In, quote, How to Cut Pay, Lay Off 8,000 People and Still Have Workers Who Love You, an article accompanying the 2002 list of best companies to work for, Fortune discussed the remarkable loyalty employees showed toward Agilent during a stressful period. The high-tech Hewlett-Packard spinoff that builds measurement, testing, and communications equipment placed 31st on the list of 100 best companies. At its peak in November 2000, Agilent employed 47,000 people, 12% more than the year before. Then came the 2001 economic downturn, compounded by the events of September 11. Agilent's sales plunged. Despite valiant efforts to avoid layoffs, such as the across-the-board 10% salary reductions, In the end, the company terminated 8,000 full-time employees and 5,000 temporary workers, about a quarter of its payroll. Management worked incessantly to make the downsizing process as transparent as possible. Constant contact through email, intranet, and meetings, both group and one-on-one, kept employees informed as the process unfolded. Agilent CEO Ned Barnholt would frequently speak directly to employees through public address systems built into its facilities around the world. As a result, employees remained tenaciously loyal and supportive of management. Quote, I knew that downsizing wasn't part of the HP way, and it's not what Bill and Dave, that's Hewlett and Packard, would have wanted, one employee told Fortune. But if they were faced with the same situation, they would have had to do the exact same thing. Just a side comment. Yeah, I really like this. Having the courage. I think it's courage and having the confidence, really, to address employees as individuals, as professionals, keeping them in the loop about what their fortune, about what their fate will be at an organization, right? Not only does it give them a cushion to, be shooting out applications and interviewing in case their position goes up on the chopping block, right, to be terminated, to be laid off, but it increases the respect that they have in the face of being fired, right? That's not burning bridges. If anything, that's keeping bridges open because economic downturns happen. So when there's an upswing, they remain viable connections. They remain viable nodes in your network, professionals you can turn to later in the future. Continuing. Employee morale is essential to Agilent's survival. Companies today must nurture knowledge workers and provide the environment for extraordinary thinking, problem solving, innovating, and executing complex business functions. If Agilent's employees became angry, bitter, or afflicted with guilt, sentiments that often arise after large layoffs, then the company's capacity for innovation and creating value would suffer. You see, I'm telling you, if they leave bitter, it'll be known and your reputation will spread. And your capacity for innovation is going to fucking fall off because if folks apply to you and come to work for you, they're just going to show up for the check and they're going to do much else. Continuing this last piece. Unlike industrial corporations of yesteryear, Agilent doesn't have mechanical assembly lines that ensure employees contribute regardless of their mood. By handling crises in a manner that doesn't undermine workers' faith in management, Agilent leaders safeguarded the company's capacity to compete. That, folks, is how you take care of business. And business takes care of you. Okay, next heading. When trust breaks down, whistleblowing. This one is about whistleblowing. When companies violate trust, the consequences can be disastrous. Bad behavior not only undermines motivation, loyalty, and productivity, it makes companies vulnerable to problematic behavior such as whistleblowing or rebellion. Yeah, that's problematic behavior, all right. Sure. Sharon Watkins, Enron's vice president for corporate development, was an 8-year veteran of the company. Margaret Sacconi, maybe Sacconi or Sassani. It's 2 C's. Ceconi, Sassani, was a deal originator in the Enron Energy Services Group and had been with the company less than a year. Like many employees, they knew about the questionable practices in the company's finance department and had raised the issue with their bosses. But, unlike others, when they got no response, they blew the whistle. They could have gone to the Houston Chronicle or the Washington Post, but instead, Watkins and Sassani wrote letters to the CEO, Kenneth Lay, warning him of the pending implosion of accounting scandals that could devastate the company and the lives of its employees. Little did they know that their letter would set the stage for a who knew what and when platform from which the seventh largest company in the United States would take its death plunge. Watkins became a celebrity after a congressional subcommittee released her letter and took her testimony on national television. She quit her job and joined the lecture circuit, speaking about the roots of Enron's collapse, talking about ethics at some of the nation's most prestigious business schools. She met with President George W. Bush. And published a book on the Enron collapse. In December 2002, Time magazine named Watkins, Colleen Raleigh of the FBI, and Cynthia Cooper of WorldCom as its Persons of the Year. Raleigh had written a memo to FBI Director Robert Mueller about how the Bureau rejected requests from her field office to investigate Zacarias Moussaoui, subsequently indicted as a September 11 co-conspirator. Cynthia Cooper blew the whistle on WorldCom when she informed its board that the company had covered up $3.8 billion in losses with phony bookkeeping. Observed Time, this is a quote from Time magazine. Quote, their jobs, their health, their privacy, their sanity, they risked all of them to bring us badly needed word of trouble inside crucial institutions. The fate of most other whistleblowers is far less glamorous. In February 1999, 3 years before the world watched WorldCom drop to its knees, Geraldine Kelly, a cost management analyst working for the company in London, saw the writing on the wall. Frustrated by WorldCom's apathy regarding her concerns, she quit her job and spoke to the City of London Fraud Squad. She quit her job and spoke to the City of London Fraud Squad and the Department of Trade and Industry. Her claims were deemed unfounded. In Richardson, Texas, 22 months later, WorldCom budget and financial analyst Kim Emif blew the whistle on an internal policy change that he knew to be fraud. Quote, pure and simple. When he got no response from his superiors, he began moving up the hierarchy, eventually reaching the chief operating officer, who told him, quote, on behalf of myself and corporate accounting, I want to thank you for making us aware of this. Rest assured, your name has never been mentioned. He was fired 10 weeks later. It's hard to be the small guy and try to get the world to listen that this is headed in the wrong direction, says Janet Emif, his wife. Yeah, I mean, it's true. When the entire world is abiding by the status quo, is working in the type of paradigm where they say, it's always been done this way, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Even though it is broken, it's just a broken cycle, and they're waiting to see, they're waiting to experience the end stage of the cycle. It's like they know the shit is happening, but and when I mean they, is just corrupt motherfuckers at the top. Corrupt motherfuckers at the top have this sick addiction to the rush they get from it, like a gambler, like a gambling addict. They really believe that they can't lose, that they can get out at the top. It's like buying low, selling high. They think they can get out at the top, and that The mousetrap won't snap shut on them like the fucking rats they are. All right, continuing. Whistleblowing came to prominence as a phenomenon in the 1999 movie The Insider, when Jeffrey Wigand, yeah, The Insider, when Jeffrey Wigand, played by Russell Crowe, made huge personal sacrifices to expose the Brown and Williamson Tobacco Company and the entire tobacco industry for spiking cigarettes with nicotine. Whistleblowers have popped up at hundreds of companies, not just such infamous cases such as Arthur Andersen, Quorum Health Services, Xerox, Morton Ticoll, Halliburton, Smith Barney, Global Crossing, Ticoll, and Duke Energy. It's funny that Halliburton is mentioned here because I did mention in the past episode, I believe it was episode 2. Yeah, I think it was episode 2, season 7, episode 2. I recommend the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. And I recommend it because that gentleman worked closely with Halliburton, not with Halliburton, but with the likes of Halliburton and Bechtel. So go ahead and Google them if you would like. Otherwise, go download the Confessions of an Economic Hitman book. It's available everywhere online. Not everywhere. You do have to go look for it. Maybe it's being scrubbed as we speak, but it's as of this date, 2023, it's still available as an ebook PDF. The federal government was the first U.S. organization to safeguard whistleblowing. Furious at unscrupulous suppliers saddling his soldiers with broken rifles and lame horses during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln persuaded Congress in 1863 to pass the False Claims Act, also known as the Lincoln Act or Informers Act. Lincoln was experiencing firsthand what Benjamin Franklin averred a century prior. There is no kind of dishonesty into which otherwise good people more easily and frequently fall than to that of defrauding the government. The law encouraged citizens to blow the whistle on companies swindling the public purse. Not only could diligent citizens feel good about helping their country, they also got 50% of the money recovered or damages won. The law's major failing, however, was that the whistleblower had to personally take the swindler to court in order to get the reward. For this reason, few citizens actually blew the whistle. You wonder why? Because motherfuckers get knocked off. They wake up with no family. They wake up with no life. They wake up lifeless. 18 years later, in 1981, the General Accounting Office estimated the federal government was bilked tens of billions of dollars annually. The Department of Justice estimated that fraud consumed up to 10% of government expenditures. In response to the perception of rampant illegality, Congress strengthened the rewards for whistleblowing in 1986. It protected employees from reprisal by their employer and gave the whistleblower 15 to 20% of the funds recovered if the government took the swindler to court. Congress noted at the time that, quote, if the government can pass a law that will increase the resources available to confront fraud against the government without paying for it with taxpayers' money, we are all better off. This is precisely what the False Claims Act is intended to do. Deputize ready and able people who have knowledge of fraud against the government to play an active and constructive role through their counsel to bring to justice those contractors who overcharge the government. And this brings us back to the ideal of public corporations, public companies or corporations, entities, any organization that is chartered by the United States government, a government of the people, for the people, by the people, right? They are chartered, meaning that they are indebted forever to the government. So to commit fraud against the government necessarily ought to mean that it's fraud against the people. But I mean, we've twisted the notion of governance in so many different directions. It's like folks don't recognize that these people are not leaders. The people we elect are not leaders. They are representatives. They are our equals. Actually, when they volunteer to run, because folks voluntarily run, they choose to put their names, to throw their names in the hat to be elected, right? To throw their names in the ring to be elected, right? But they are elected to be public servants. So if folks to be public servants, to be less than us people who elect them. That's supposed to be how the game is played, right? This quote unquote game of life. They choose to take up being elected to be a representative and serve others, serve the people that elected them. They're not leaders. They're not better than us. Maybe more noble, but they're not noblemen. They're not royalty. They aren't. They aren't. Continuing. Citizens responded enthusiastically. More than 3,600 lawsuits have been filed since the 1986 revisions. In the 2000-2001 fiscal year, the government recovered nearly $1.2 billion, with more than $210 million awarded to individuals who disclosed the frauds. The General Accounting Office maintains a, quote, fraud net website where citizens can submit examples of fraud and abuse of government funds. With so much money flowing to citizens blowing the whistle on companies trying to fleece the government, it's no surprise a small industry has grown up to encourage the practice. Dozens of websites, typically run by law firms, beckon potential whistleblowers with offers of comfort and guidance. The www.whistleblowerfirm.com site says, it's a block quote, the block quote's next. It says, if you have found this website, then you have taken a significant first step. Our clients are current and former employees of companies that do business with the government, either directly or indirectly. They are highly skilled, ethical, and have already tried to bring the fraud to their superiors' attention. Almost always, they are told, in some fashion, to mind their own business. We understand what you have gone through, or continue to go through. This is a pattern we have experienced through our clients over and over again. We also understand what it takes to file and prosecute a proper and responsible lawsuit. Give us a call. We can help you both in and out of court. All communications are replied to promptly and in confidence. Now, as idealistic as that sounds, I actually commend some of these firms that take it upon themselves to guide whistleblowers through the process and navigate them. I don't know what the help looks like in and out of court. I don't know, maybe they set them up in a safe house of some kind. Maybe they supply them with a new identity, because when you burn a corporation, you burn your fucking self. This is corporate war. I mean, do you blame them? When you corner a rat, the rat bites. Continuing, such sites can be hugely comforting to a potential whistleblower. To be a whistleblower, writes C. Fred Alford, is to step outside the great chain of being, to join not just another religion, but another world. Sometimes this other world I don't know why that sounded so ominous all of a sudden, but to join another world. You mean the other world? You mean the afterworld, the afterlife? You mean to fucking die? Because in some instances, if you don't do this shit right, you're committing more than just career suicide. Sometimes this other world, the quote continues, sometimes this other world is called the margins of society, but to the whistleblower, it feels like outer space. Now that employees have such ready access to support mechanisms, it's not surprising that the number of whistleblowing incidents increase yearly. When Time magazine asked its Persons of the Year whistleblowers if they would have done anything differently, Watkins replied, "I wouldn't not do it. But what I really failed to grasp was the seriousness of the emperor has no clothes phenomenon." The seriousness of the emperor has no clothes phenomenon. "I thought leaders were made in moments of crisis, and I naively thought that I would be handing Enron chairman Ken Lay his leadership moment. I honestly thought people would step up, but I said he was naked, and when he turned to the ministers around him, they said they were sure he was clothed." More than a decade before Time magazine declared these whistleblowers heroes, Congress was so taken with the idea of exposing misdeeds against the governments that it tried to expand the concept to misdeeds within the government and granted protection to government employees who exposed wrongdoing inside the executive branch. Damn. I mean, you talk about corporate war, man. When you combine corporate and just pure politics, what you get is just cutthroat communism, dog. All right. The unanimously passed Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989 forbade reprisals against bureaucrats who revealed illegality, mismanagement, abuse of authority, gross waste, and substantial and specific danger to public health or safety. Subsequent court decisions undermined much of the protection that Congress promised bureaucrats, so in 1994, Congress repassed the law, again unanimously, with tougher provisions. However, the Department of Homeland Security legislation exempted its employees from the whistleblowing protection enjoyed by other civil servants. And if you didn't know, the Department of Homeland Security I think it was instituted in 2001 with the passing of the Patriot Act, or alongside the Patriot Act, after the quote terrorist attacks in 2001. So if the Department of Homeland Security has exempted itself and they supposedly work in counterterrorism, counterterror intel, that sort of thing, rest assured, if they're breaking laws and they've got witnesses, they're not leaving witnesses. So they either exempt themselves from liability or they exempt themselves from liability with force. All right. Unfortunately, the impact of the Whistleblower Protection Act has been limited. The executive branch is not keen on publicizing misdeeds or incompetence within its ranks. You don't fucking say. Mismanagement or gross waste is often in the eye of the beholder. Mismanagement or gross waste. Do you mean like the mismanagement and gross waste the day before September 11 by the Pentagon? Not surprisingly, the bureaucracy prefers to deal with such matters quietly, away from the media spotlight, and in a manner that doesn't reflect on the current administration. Yeah, I mean, you've got spin, you've got deflection, you've got misdirection, disinformation, misinformation. This all goes hand in hand with governmentis, that is to rule the brain. Govern, to rule, and then ment, the brain. All right. The executive branch is mismanagement. Not surprisingly, the bureaucracy prefers to deal with such matters quietly, away from the media spotlight, and in a manner that doesn't reflect on the current administration. Taxpayer watchdog groups decry the way court decisions and executive branch behavior have gutted the intent of the Whistleblower Protection Act. In a letter to President George W. Bush, the Government Accountability Project lamented that, quote, unless the whistleblower is a celebrity through media exposure like the FBI's Colleen Raleigh, the bureaucracy routinely ignores, harasses, or silences the messengers through career execution. It's probably more like actual execution, but what's 2 bullets to the back of the head and made it look like a suicide, Most frequently, it says, by yanking their security clearances and branding them unfit to see classified information. I mean, that just sounds like standard bullshit, standard, like a standard disciplinary action, right? They're not going to do all that. If you blow the whistle, they're not going to be like, oh, your clearance is revoked. It's going to be more like, oh, your fucking, your brake lines got clipped. If whistleblowers still do not have the protections that Congress has tried to grant, private sector whistleblowers have even less. You know why? Because now you're fucking with corporate. Now you're fucking with people who don't need badges, who don't need to follow the law. I mean, to an extent, right? That is transparently. When you take an oath, right, and you get issued a badge and a gun, you are supposed to uphold. It's like you ought to uphold the law. But when you don't have that, I mean, do you really need to follow the law? As long as they don't know what's going on. Employees are protected from employer reprisals only in relatively few circumstances and industries, such as disclosures involving airline safety or violations at nuclear power plants. Quote, we need to understand in this land of the free and home of the brave that most people are scared to death, Dr. Alford said. About 50% of all whistleblowers lose their jobs. About half of those lose their homes. And half of those people lose their families. Damn, they straight up kill their families? I'm joking. Lose their families probably because they lose their jobs and lose their homes and lose a way to sustain a family. But, you know, either way, I think if you expose enough dirt on the government, you could say bye to your family. But make no mistake, continuing, whistleblowing will not go away. Corporate whistleblowers are typically young and often women. They are not a homogeneous group. Some have strong values that conflict with the behavior of management. Others see a personal risk to themselves in management's behavior and make a calculated choice to whistleblow in order to protect themselves. Some financial managers, for example, have been asked to sign statements that they know to be fraudulent and have chosen to whistleblow rather than risk professional or criminal sanctions. Some, no doubt, are troubled individuals who have been isolated from the corporation. Others have less lofty motives, such as revenge. What's wrong with revenge? Revenge is fucking delicious cold. It's like cold pizza and a cold crispy beer after a night out digging holes. Down Under, a group known as Whistleblowers Australia, uses the internet to encourage citizens to speak out about corruption, dangers to the public, and other social issues by encouraging self-help and mutual help among whistleblowers. I wonder what kind of self-help. Is it like this podcast or something more square? The organization provides articles and leaflets, so just literature and pamphlets, to whistleblowers and publishes a newsletter. How cute. It also holds meetings of whistleblowers and supporters and provides contacts with like-minded individuals and groups. Yeah, but more than likely they've got fucking plants and spies and agents in them, splinter cells, where if you come out into a group, imagine a group of like 6-7 individuals, and they're treating each other like they're in some kind of witness protection program because they blew the whistle and now they had to fucking run for their life, right? And you're joining this group and you're detailing the events of your career's demise, and then the 6 of them, right, because you're the 7th, the 6 of them turn to you and they're all agents and you're fucked. I wouldn't doubt that happens. I wouldn't doubt it's happened before. Down Under, it says the organization provides articles, it holds meetings. That's funny. I mean, I'm not downing whistleblowers. I'm not outright bagging and shitting on them like what they've done, right? Because in order for, I guess, government, in order for society, in order for Western civilization to continue running with an air of legitimacy, some of the shit has got to be exposed. And what I mean by expose it, some of this has to be aired. Like the hope that whistleblowing is always successful has to be put out there. Why? Because it provides a semblance of hope for some people, something to have faith in, which is the Constitution, which is our Declaration of Independence, something that we can do as a nation. But if it's not something we can do as a nation, that's why this podcast was made. So it's something you can do as an individual, as a corporate cowboy. You don't need to blow the whistle. What you've got to do is hold on. I was going to say shake hands, but you only do that if you're dual wielding. Shake your hand at people. You don't even have to shake a finger. You just got to squeeze lightly. It's less than 4 pounds. All right. But making a mistake, whistleblowing is not going away. Where did it go? Continuing. Corporations pay a heavy price for opacity and for reprisals against whistleblowers. If employees suffer an injustice and feel that they have no place to turn, or that the mechanisms supposedly in place are ineffectual, and if they blow the whistle, word spreads like wildfire. If they are still not taken seriously, morale will suffer throughout the organization. The upshot is that some companies are turning to third parties to operate confidential telephone hotlines or intranet sites that employees can turn to if they want to blow the whistle on improper behavior. Some companies, let me just read that again, because that's the funniest shit I've contemplated. That's the funniest shit I've had to consider so far in this book, and I've laughed at a lot, right? I love to laugh. The upshot, it says, there's a silver lining. But I think it's a silver lining for companies, because it says here some companies are turning to third parties to operate confidential telephone hotlines or intranet sites that employees can turn to if they want to blow the whistle on improper behavior. So this is like a service that employees could call into thinking that they're blowing the whistle. That's the point. They're just thinking they're doing something right. Meanwhile, this third party fake whistleblowing service is just going to inform on the employee back to management, and before you know it, the employee gets clipped. The employee gets terminated. It's the employee that suffers at the end. I mean, it doesn't get any more ironic than that. When an employee doesn't know how to think for themselves, when the employee is uneducated, they never fucking see it coming. They're too naive. They're too innocent. It's sad. Sometimes it is. Yet I still laugh. The goal of these services is to make employees confident that an indifferent management won't brush their complaints aside. That's it, really? National hotline services and the network each has hundreds of corporate clients. They provide a safe outlet for employees to raise ethical concerns, ranging from allegations of sexual harassment, fraud, and kickbacks to safety violations. Better still, of course, are companies that create cultures of trust where whistleblowing is unnecessary. Yet, every company needs to offer employees an ombudsman. Sorry, ombudsman, this guy. Yet, every company needs to offer employees an ombudsman. Ombudsman is like it's like a company representative that serves as a conduit of communication to and from management. So if any grievances or complaints have to be submitted to the company, the ombudsman has enough knowledge, has enough clout within the organization to either make some changes or make suggestions. But ombudsmen, they're not as popular. I think they could be popularized further. I think there could be more of them, but it's not as widely practiced legally as it could be. Yet every company needs to offer employees an ombudsman telephone hotline or other procedure to voice their concerns that is easy to use, well known, and demonstrably free from retaliation. demonstrably free. Like the company's got to set up this trap looking device, right? This trap-looking mechanism, this trap-looking process, and then convince the employee that it's not a trap, right? Like, why else? It's like in today's day and age, 2023, hiring another company to do this type of work that requires an employee to really trust the system and really trust that this information, this particular sensitive piece of information that could bury the corporation, doesn't make it back to the corporation. Dog, I'm not gambling on that. I'm not even beginning to gamble on that. Fuck all of that. I'd rather take it into my own hands, because that way I know it can be handled. And if it can't be handled, it's like the like the phrase goes, it's suddenly not my problem anymore. All right, continuing. Mistrust is infectious and travels fast. That was the last line of that paragraph. The next subheading, corporate character. How can companies How can companies improve their cultures through active transparency? Social scientists and business researchers have argued that high trust societies more easily spawn large corporations. Francis Fukuyama notes that societies with associations based on family or kinship, religious or governmental ties, but lacking generalized trust, such as China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, France, and Italy, have tended to create smaller, less successful enterprises. High trust societies like Japan, Germany, and the United States have been more successful in building large-scale enterprises. Yet, corporate cultures vary dramatically among and within Japan, Germany, and the United States. We've spent over a decade showing how focused, networked firms perform better than traditional vertically integrated corporations. In such firms as Kroger, HP, that's Hewlett-Packard, Johnson & Johnson, Herman Miller, Google, and Progressive, bonds of informal trust become more important than formal bonds or hierarchy. Command and control models, typical in Japan and Germany, tend to be less effective than the empowerment models of the United States, Canada, and Scandinavia. Trust is critical to distributed knowledge work, but the trust of U.S. workers in their employers has soured since the economic downturn began in 2000. And the upbeat, can-do attitude of the 1990s, has largely evaporated. Workers are depressed by the weak economy and high-profile bankruptcies such as Enron and WorldCom, and the lavish compensation packages many senior executives have enjoyed. A New York Times / CBS News poll found in October 2002 that U.S. workers were more anxious about the economy than at any time since 1993. The survey found that 56% considered the economy fairly bad or very bad. 39% said they thought the economy would get worse, and only 13% predicted it could get better. The Times noted that in a strong departure from the 1990s, when CEOs were often hailed as heroes, workers are voicing a sense of anger, even betrayal, toward top executives. Among experts in human resources, a sharp debate is underway about whether workers' commitment to their employers has waned in response to corporate downsizing, and a sense that many top executives have betrayed workers and investors. According to a Rutgers University of Connecticut poll, 58% of workers think that most top executives are interested only in looking out for themselves, even if it harms their company. For the first time in 2 decades, most workers surveyed said that they would join a union if they could, seeing this as a path to greater job security. They don't know shit about unions. They don't know shit about hierarchy. They don't know shit about organizations, because those motherfuckers at the top of the union, like at the top rungs of the ladder of a union, are just the same motherfuckers. They probably golf with CEOs. Unions are capitalizing on this receptive mood and using technologies such as the web to speak directly to workers in ways that were not possible previously. America's non hierarchical businesses feed on trust and, relatedly, are most vulnerable to crises of trust. Traditional corporate hierarchies have stronger mechanisms for control. In Japan, for example, there is reverence for authority, obedience, fear of punishment, and status based purely on rank help ensure stability. Many individuals have enjoyed lifetime employment at one company. Promotion has often been based on seniority rather than on merit. Employees work in the offices of their corporation and rarely remotely or at home. In networked, distributed firms, such as those in the United States, trust is more implicit and not as formally baked into an organizational structure. As such, it is fragile. Corporate cultures are more meritocratic. Corporate cultures are more meritocratic. Yeah, for the large part, I would say I think you do a good job. If you do a better job in some firms in the United States, typically meritocracy has reigned, right? It's not, but it's not standard practice. Keep in mind, I mean, some folks kiss ass, suck dick, and grab ass in order to get promotions, but for the most part, meritocracy wins for the most part. I mean, sometimes meritocracy looks dirty. Sometimes meritocracy looks extra legal. But for the most part, actually, I want to say always. It verges on always winning. Meritocracy almost always wins. It's the first half of self-sabotage. Like I'm telling you, it really is. In networked distributed firms like the United States, corporate cultures, it says, are more meritocratic. Nice. Trust is based on the tacit understanding that if you play by the rules and perform well, you will succeed. When trust breaks down, the results are typically disastrous and swift. Today, businesses face a clear and present danger: a decline of generalized trust in society combined with behavior that undermines trust in the workplace. People who performed well in many failing companies nonetheless lost everything. Some who failed to perform made out like bandits, and some were bandits. I mean, I would consider those to be the gambling addicts, the gamblers, the gambling addicts at the top who got out at the top, right? Who got out at the peak before the mousetrap shut. Firms need to be of good character, not unlike people. When we think of individuals having character, we conjure up traits like honesty, reliability, benevolence, and integrity. Persons of good character are forthright, straight shooting, fuck yeah, like a corporate cowboy, shoot straight with both hands, and open in their interactions with others. They abide by their commitments. They conduct their lives on the basis of ethical values. These are the same traits that characterize the open enterprise. The people in a firm determine its character, but a firm can also shape the character of its people. Most assume that a person's character is formed long before that person becomes an adult and enters the workforce. Some economists might even argue that work and competition bring out the self-interest in people and that the influence of the workplace on character is somehow negative. But Ralph Larson, CEO of Johnson & Johnson, argues that work in the modern firm can be a character-building experience. There's a block quote. I contend that the influence does not have to be negative. Indeed, our corporations and free enterprise system are surely in jeopardy if it is. On the contrary, it is our experience that the modern workplace can be an extraordinarily powerful and positive character-building institution. I feel that character, both personal and corporate, is a company's most valuable resource and attribute. End quote. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, Johnson & Johnson CEO Robert Wood Johnson wrote Try Reality, a pamphlet that asked business to adopt a new industrial philosophy. He said, quote, industry only has the right to succeed where it performs a real economic service and is a true social asset. Damn, this guy Robert Wood Johnson sounds he sounds chill, man. He went on to order the responsibilities a company has. He went on to order the responsibilities. Yeah, I guess to order. He went on to order the responsibilities a company has to its various stakeholders. Johnson believed that if companies were going to be allowed by governments, you see, going to be when they're chartered, it's because they are calling them into existence. When they are chartered, they are allowed by governments and society to operate in a free market system. Continuing, unencumbered by burdensome laws and regulations, then they need to act in socially responsible ways. A few years later, he expanded this view into the J&J Credo. Of course, corporate character is not defined by a document. It is defined by the actions of people. No documents can foresee all the choices that employees face in an increasingly complex and transparent world. Values need to be in the DNA of a firm. Johnson & Johnson awkwardly but aptly calls this credoization. Credoization. A salesperson is invited to a competitor's suite at a trade show. A manager must lay off someone, and the lowest performer is the only woman in his group. What? Hold on. A salesperson is invited to a competitor's suite at a trade show. A manager must lay off someone, and the lowest performer is the only woman. Maybe I'm not understanding. And the lowest performer is the only. Is this supposed to be sexist or something? A trade show. A manager must lay off someone, and the lowest performer is the only woman in his group. An employee receives a funny but sexually explicit email from a colleague. An executive can increase share price and short-term investor confidence by deeply cutting headcount. What is this? A client manager has an opportunity to overcharge a customer and make his bonus. A salesperson is asked by a government official for a, quote, favor. A manager is congratulated by the CEO for someone else's accomplishments. A freshly hired MBA is explaining disappointing quarterly results to an institutional shareholder. A purchasing agent gets offered courtside seats by a key vendor. What the fuck was the point of that whole paragraph? This sounds like business as usual, which is a lot of fuckery, but still, this is like business as usual. When J&J employees face such dilemmas, it says, the credo provides a guide to do the right thing. According to Larson, it helps good people be the best they can be. In this sense, it is a character builder. Okay, I mean, maybe I'm understanding. Maybe I am understanding correctly, where Larson maybe viewed the employee as a child of the corporation, a ward of the corporation, because they got taken in from the wild, right? Where they could have been independent contractors, and brought them in from the cold, where they became employees. That's a pretty apt analogy, if I might say. I just pulled that out my ass. I just pulled that out the top of my head. But you're pulling in what could have been independent contractors, and you are raising them, cultivating them, nurturing them, developing them into employees. And so this credo that is supposedly in the DNA of the corporation, you can then inculcate your employees to act a certain way for the benefit of the corporation, in addition to benefit them, like you're raising kids. So when, in a sense, this is a character builder, it builds character, nice. Increasingly, in a transparent world, such corporate character is critical to business success. Says Larson, quote, we have learned that principled action is not only the moral thing, it is the correct business decision. With each right decision we make, we reinforce the trust people have in our products and us. And conversely, with each transgression, we erode the special character so critical to our success. Yeah, I would venture to say yes. That's absolutely right. It can take years to build trust, even between people, even between friends. And it could take an instant to break that trust and have you not trust somebody. It could be, again, it could be a look, it could be a word, it could be an action. To not trust somebody ever again, I mean, it could be something as small as a 22 round. All right. Increasingly, in a transparent world, okay, I already read that. When Tylenol's integrity was violated by the 1982 lid tampering scandal, Johnson & Johnson's stock immediately dropped 18%. But it recovered quickly. Larson reflects on the experience. Quote, "It has been my experience that people who make it a habit to work at making the correct ethical decisions in the countless small choices we face in life are most often those same people who can be counted on to make the ethical correct decisions on the big things when a crisis hits and the pressure is on. The character of an open enterprise starts with the CEO. Tony Comper is the CEO of the BMO Financial Group, a financial services organization with $250 billion in assets and 33,000 employees, Illuminati confirmed. BMO provides a broad range of retail banking, wealth management, and investment banking products and solutions in Canada and through Chicago-based Harris Bank, the United States. As in any company, tricky situations arise continuously arise. Comper handles these differently than many CEOs. When information comes to light that might embarrass the bank, his staff reports they've never heard him ask, "How do we get out of this mess?" Rather, he poses the question, "What's the right thing to do here?" This is now part of the bank's folklore. A culture of doing the right thing has developed. It seems to make short-term business sense to turn off the credit tap to small businesses during the 2001-2002 downturn. But Comper decided to be loyal to small business and take some short-term risks. Doing the right thing in this case meant standing by customers through tough times. The result, BMO has more than doubled its market share. Damn. Imagine that. Who would have thought? Who would have thought standing for the small guy, standing for the small person, right? Not just throwing money by going woke and then going broke, right? But actually standing for the small guy would get you somewhere, right? And sometimes it's a small guy that's got to stand for themselves, inside or outside of the government, inside or outside of the corporation. If you're out in the cold, you got to learn to make fire. You got to carry that fucking fire with you and not get caught lacking on some corporate cowboy shit, though. Persons other than a CEO can, of course, influence a firm's character. Mahatma Gandhi said, quote, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." I had one for that. Nah, it slipped my mind. But I had one for that. Be the change you want to see in the world. I had something for that I was going to put on the Corporate Cowboys page, but it's all right. Continuing this last sentence: when individuals show character in a transparent world, it can be infectious. Yeah, it can. When you show character in a transparent world, it is infectious. It changes the dynamic in a room, in a conference hall, in Congress. The next subheading, the power shift. While increasingly essential to business success, transparency is a double-edged sword, since it also creates an unprecedented power shift in favor of employees, particularly those who are strong contributors. This promises to shake the foundation of the corporation as much as the original trade union movements of the early industrial corporation. Considering the tough job market and the huge increases in executive compensation over the past years, it may seem that employees are losing ground. But there's more here than meets the eye. Transparency brings market forces to bear on labor markets. The friction in labor markets is melting as salaried personnel have newfound access to information about jobs and employers through companies such as Vault.com and Monster.com. When unemployment is high, as in the case of Silicon Valley today, whoa, hold up, because this was written in 2002, and Silicon Valley is going through layoffs right now in the tech sector. That's weird. It's almost like as if there's a cycle, right? When unemployment is high, as in the case of Silicon Valley today, knowledge of labor markets is less useful. You don't say. You don't say. But with normal markets, I misread that one. But with normal levels of unemployment, knowledge is power, especially for people with in-demand capabilities. CGI is a rapidly growing information technology services firm with more than 21,000 employees worldwide and revenues of more than $2 billion. More than 80% of employees, which it calls members, are shareholders. Members can change management behavior in various ways. For example, in each region, there is an annual meeting/dinner that all members attend. There or here they can challenge corporate management in what President Mike Roach refers to as a bear pit session. Says Roach, quote, "This is not just about management accountability, but member accountability. If you're an owner of the company, as most members are, you have responsibility to provide leadership." Like many firms, CGI surveys employee satisfaction each year. The difference is that management compensation depends in part on the results. Quote, "If you treat employees as owners, you have a higher responsibility to them, and they have responsibility to you. Profit sharing encourages transparency," says Roach. IBM, though, generally viewed as one of the best employers and a leader of the digital revolution, has experienced the effects of the shift to employee power. It is closely scrutinized by a number of online employee groups who are worried about the company's attempts to reduce pension and healthcare benefits. In May 1999, IBM announced a plan to move from a traditional pension plan to a cash balance plan, saying that only 30,000 employees near retirement age could remain with the older, more generous scheme. Within months, however, the giant computer, I'm reading this shit backwards. I'm developing dyslexia. Within months, however, the computer giant was forced to more than double the number of employees who could remain with the traditional plan, as angry workers organized via the internet on Yahoo discussion groups and other websites. Dog, that sounds low-key corny. You mean nobody's knees got fucking broke? Nobody lost function in one or both of their hands because of this? That's weird to me. IBM, to its credit, faced a difficult problem. And I mean that in the best sense. I mean, when you do something wrong, when you do something bad, when you do something evil, when you do something not righteous, yeah, you ought to get your fucking hands broke. Idle hands, right? Idle hands. IBM, to its credit, faced a difficult problem with its pension program where it needed to shift resources toward stock ownership in order to attract talented workers during the technology boom. When it was clear that the new program wasn't going to fly, IBM took the right approach in dealing with this crisis. It engaged with the employees to address the situation. Says IBM executive John Iwata, quote, "We focused on creating a dialogue. We have a rich tradition established many decades ago to allow employees to express how they genuinely feel about things through many channels. We have a Speak Up program. We have the Open Door program. Different programs to allow employees to express how they genuinely feel about things to the very top of the business. And believe me, sometimes they utilize those channels to express grave dissatisfaction." I like the use of grave here. Iwata today doesn't view this as, quote, one that management lost. Rather, quote, "We think that to be consistent with our values and our relationship with our workforce, we needed to make the required adjustment." McDonald's is quickly learning the power of increased transparency to its workers and the general public. Until recently, the company was pretty much having transparency forced on it. McDonald's scattered structure has long frustrated attempts to unionize its workforce. Often, when a store is unionized, the company retaliates by shutting it down. But with the internet's arrival, McDonald's employees can now contact one another, share information, and organize in a manner that was previously undreamt of. Dog, that shit ain't happening. Look at 2023. They're still trying to unionize fucking Starbucks and Amazon. That shit ain't happening. In 2002, that shit was not happening. One of the best known employee sites is the McDonald's Workers Resistance. According to its website, the resistance doesn't have, quote, any leaders, paid campaigns, or anything like that. We're just crew members like you. MWR will only be successful if workers keep getting involved. That means you. If every McDonald's worker who reads this site and agreed with us got involved, then together we would be able to do wonderful things. We need your help. And the reason I'm reading it like a fucking square is because I said unions are just another form of hierarchy, right? I like the idea that they decentralized this communication and, posted it on a website. But even that shit can get hijacked. You could get plants and spies from McDonald's corporate fucking up the game and spreading disinformation and misinformation. If you're not educating your workforce and just leaving it at that, educate them, make them corporate cowboys, have them learn to negotiate for themselves, to value themselves, to provide for themselves, to be capable professionals. Otherwise, you're just going to have groups of sheep, and you're going to have to become a herder of the flock. And you're going to think you're worth more because you're doing it. And really, you're not. You're just another professional managing professionals, right? So the thought that you ought to get paid more because you're unionizing, and I'm talking about this idea of leadership, right? You can be a leader without pushing it on people, right? People just naturally follow natural born leaders. I mean, there's a difference between charisma and leadership. Being charismatic and being a leader. There is a difference. Where was I? We need your help, fucking squares. The oldest and most popular anti-McDonald's website is McSpotlight, operating since 1996 and offering more than 120 megabytes of the inside scoop on McDonald's operations. It is designed for the general public, not just employees. Yeah, I mean, I like sites like that, right? Like if you were to regionalize problems, right? Like if there was a McDonald's in some remote part of the country in a state, some state, some city, right? And you know that this manager is fucking weak. They're cutting corners, quality is dropping, they're really slipping up in life. I don't give a fuck about what their stress level is, right? Like they got fucking mouths to feed, so they've developed a coke habit or a gambling habit, and they're just an utter piece of shit, so they take it out on their employees, right? What? Well, would it not be in the workers' best interest to not have that manager? What are you going to do instead? You're going to unionize for what? What's the fucking point? I mean, the CEO of McDonald's, to an extent, I guess, has deniability. They've got plausible deniability to a degree, right? Because they're insulated in that upper echelon of society where they are, where they live. And I've said this before in a previous podcast that they could believe, the CEO of McDonald's, the CEO of Burger King, of Carl's Jr., of whichever one, fucking pick one, right? They could really believe that they are feeding people nutritious meals at a great price. And they might eat there every day, right? And it's not impossible to imagine that it's the CEO who's getting fucked over by middle management, because middle management wants to churn a profit. And so they pump up numbers. And so they doctor reports. And so they tell the CEO that they are winning every quarter. Meanwhile, they strike backroom deals. Meanwhile, they're union busting or whatever the fuck. Meanwhile, they're out contracting this mysterious pink slime to make patties with, right? That the CEO might not have a fucking clue about. And yet and yet the CEO could live happily ever after, just being lied to by the next person down, the fucking vice president or whomever, right? So the fuckery could begin one rung down or two rungs down or three rungs down or at the fucking store level, right? It might not even be corporate direction. But what happens at the store level, what happens on the ground level informs what happens up top. Well, it's corporate war. What can I say? Other than go back to season 1, episode 1 and get cracking. Become a corporate cowboy today. We need your help. We want you to become a corporate cowboy. The oldest and most popular anti-McDonald's McSpotlight. It is designed for the general public, not just employees. McSpotlight does more than could any union. I believe it. Yeah, unions ain't shit for the most part. It created the Mick Information Network, a UK-based group drawing on volunteers from 22 countries on 4 continents. The network is dedicated to, quote, compiling and disseminating factual, accurate, up-to-date information and encouraging debate about the workings, policies, and practices of the McDonald's Corporation and all they stand for. The network also highlights opposition to McDonald's and other transnational companies. Borrowing a page from the environmental movement, McDonald's protest websites encourage citizens to think globally and act locally. I mean, I guess that's a good ideal. Think globally, act locally. Think globally, act locally. Think globally, maybe think universally and act locally. Like if you could, because who said if you, it was a philosopher. I'm fucking forgetting. Who said act in a manner that, if universalized, would be better. You feel me? So like act in a way where if everyone acted the way you act, everyone would be better off. And I forget what philosopher said it. I know I probably fucking butchered it, but you know, I regurgitate the best way I know how. I spit hot fire, you feel me? The oldest and most popular, and I already read that, borrowing a page from the environmental movement, McDonald's protest websites encourages citizens to think globally and act locally. By sharing experiences from around the world, protesters realize that they are part of a much larger movement and that their local efforts matter. If you want to stop a McDonald's from being built in your neighborhood, you can take heart that hundreds of other neighborhoods in dozens of countries are doing the same. To what does McDonald's owe the pleasure of being the target of strident, state-of-the-art vigilante websites? McSpotlight explains. Quote, yes, we appreciate that McDonald's only sell hamburgers and loads of other corporations are just as bad, but that's not the point. They have been used as a symbol of all multinationals and big business relentlessly pursuing their profits at the expense of anything that stands in their way. Again, that could easily just be middle management. Like the CEO maybe doesn't have a fucking clue, right? I mean, and it could be that it's not even corporate stores doing it. It could be franchisees doing it, right? McDonald's McDonald's I'm continuing. Quote, McDonald's were chosen for this dubious honor because A, everyone's heard of them, B, they're bullies who threaten legal action on almost anyone who dares criticize them, C, there's stacks of in-depth information available about them, thanks to the research that's gone into the McLibel trial, D, the nature of their business means loads of contemporary issues are relevant, E, they pioneered various unwelcome practices which other companies have followed, and F, they take themselves far too seriously. No, they don't. They've got a fucking clown for a mascot. The site attracts more than 1 million visitors per month, with no facet of the company's operations left unexplored. Damn, this site sounds interesting, actually. I might go check it out. I've never been, and yet I might go check it out just for the sake of organizational studies. Yours truly, Alex. Let's see here. Before the World Wide Web arrived, most protesters measured success by the amount of media coverage they attracted. Much like the tree falling in the forest, if a protest doesn't get television time or column inches in a newspaper, it didn't really happen. But increasingly, protesters don't care whether the local newspaper gives them publicity. They can achieve exposure on their own. That's not really true. In 2023, there's huge protests occurring worldwide that are renouncing these mandates and these guidelines in 2023 that are being imposed by governments and regimes. But they don't get any attention, and a lot of folks stay asleep. October 16, 2002, I'm continuing. October 16, 2002 was the 18th annual Worldwide Anti-McDonald's Day, and McSpotlight claims it was the most successful so far. I wonder how they're doing today in 2023. Probably more blocked and shadow banned than ever. For the first time, it says, the McDonald's workers' resistance encouraged employees to join the protests. Ooh, there was actual protest? Employees were asked to not show up for work or to go to work and sabotage operations. Sounds fucking retarded. Accordingly to the resistance website, they had reports of local protests from Australia to Mexico, Russia to South Africa, Brazil, and the United States, and throughout Eastern and Western Europe, including Ireland and the United Kingdom. As described by the site, and just real quick before I read this block quote, the reason I don't believe in these protests is because it artificially lowers the standard of quality, right? Where if you leave work thinking, believing, following the mass of fucking sheep that are just out on the street baying, right? I forget what the fucking term is called. What do sheep do? I'll look it up for you right now if you want. What noise do sheep make? It's called to use the word bah. Yeah, bah. But what's the sound? What's the sound called? Bleat. That's right. Bleat. B-L-E-A-T. Bleeding in the streets. It sounds even funnier when you use it. All right, if you're out there following the masses, fucking bleeding in the streets, right? Whining, whinging and whining, fucking complaining, crying, bitching, right? If you're out there in the streets and you're not working, you're not doing anything productive when you could be getting better, when you could be networking better, you could be moving up, actually cutting throats. Instead, you believe you're doing something cutthroat, but only because you've been ordered by somebody else, by this fake ass McUnion. So you for temporarily you artificially lower the standard of quality of work, the standard of performance. So fucking anybody who shows up to work and then, later are labeled a scab just because they need money, or they'll show up to work for the free fucking McChicken that they get on their shift or whatever. They just have to show up to work and they're promoted. And the next day you're fucking fired. And then you go off and run and fucking cry and whine. Oh, McDonald's is anti-union. They fired me. No, dog, it's because you're not working. Period. You could easily be out there cracking skulls. Not out there. In there. You could be in McDonald's cracking skulls, making your way up the ladder, right? You signed the line. You wanted to work at McDonald's, so you became a McDonald's rep. You wear the McDonald's shirt, right? So if management is fucking it up for you, they're fucking it up for McDonald's, right? They brought you in from the cold. They are, quote unquote, your family temporarily while you've agreed to work for them under your terms of employment. If your manager is fucking it up, you take the manager out. Hold on. In Minecraft, relax. I mean, like a corporate cowboy. You do it right, you do it professionally. On October 16, the most successful McDonald's day, whatever the fuck, the block quote, that's right, as described by the site. On the day itself, according to reports received, action included strikes in stores in Paris and Norfolk, a stoppage in Moscow, an attempted strike at a store in an attempted strike, really? Attempted strike at a store in New Zealand and London, England, a walkout in Nottingham, collective resignations in Glasgow, many acts of absenteeism, defiance, and disruption by individuals and small groups of workers in many countries, including the US, Ireland, Australia, Canada, Denmark, Madrid, and Germany. In addition, there were solidarity actions by protesters in support of McDonald's workers in the north of Ireland, Germany, Australia, Scotland, Sweden, Serbia, and England, and especially in Italy, including a blockade in Milan. I wonder why especially Italy. Why they got it listed like that? Especially Italy. Like, is Italy just more retarded? In 6 Paris McDonald's controlled by CNT France, they went on to strike around specific demands related to full-time employment and standardized pay rates. They gathered at 10 a.m. by the Fountain of Innocence. At 3 p.m., they were due to meet with McDonald's representatives, and they arranged a public meeting in the evening. In Norfolk, a strike crippled the restaurant. There was a picket that held for most of the day. At one point, a manager came out to moan pitifully, "Why are you doing this? Read the leaflet." "I'm not reading that," he raged, ripping it up. When McDonald's head office was asked why the store was virtually unstaffed, they replied it was because of some sad individuals trying to take McDonald's down. I mean, where's the lie? And then there was the magnificent news from Moscow. As far as we can understand, they negotiated with a, quote, friendly manager to be allowed to stop work for a short time without the matter being taken further. Although lacking... Hold on. As far as we can understand, they negotiated with a friendly manager to be allowed to stop work for a short time without the matter being taken further. Yo, whoever this Moscow manager was sounds based as fuck. How funny. How funny is it that your manager tells you to take the time off? Don't fucking come to the store. And they're considered friendly. There has to be some other motivating factor there. Maybe some involvement by nefarious, extra legal characters, right? Because that is the equivalent of let's say a complaint, right? A complaint being sent to your department, and you, as the manager, have to field this complaint, and the person complaining really is just venting and crying and whining and just griping about being disserviced, being dissatisfied, about feeling bad, about feeling sad or whatever the fuck. And then all you do is just hear them out, tell them, literally tell them to go take a walk, and they thank you for it. They call you friendly. What a gangster. Although lacking much common language, the feeling of international solidarity as we talked on the phone was amazing. End block quote. Nice. Continuing. You don't need to form a workers' movement to set up a website to criticize your boss. Some frustrated workers go ahead and do it themselves. Consider the battle between pharmaceutical firm Wyeth Arist, Canada Inc., and Lois Phaneuf, the company's former manager of training and development. Phaneuf, a single mom, established a website to publicize her continuing efforts to receive long-term disability benefits because of chronic pain that she says started while employed at Wyeth Arist. Their callous, quote, this is a quote, their callous treatment of me during a time when I was seriously ill makes for interesting and enlightening reading for anyone who has Wyeth Arist in mind for a career, is using the products, or is presently in their employ. Phaneuf says on the site, Wyeth Arist says such material causes irreparable harm and hurts its ability to attract new staff. Yo, should I restart this paragraph? Because I dropped the ball after that rant, huh? Quote, their callous treatment of me during a time when I was seriously ill makes for interesting and enlightening reading for anyone who has Wyeth Arist in mind for a career, is using their products, or is presently in their employ. Phaneuf says on the site, Wyeth Arist says such material causes irreparable harm and hurts its ability to attract new staff. Doubtless this is true, if only because some visitors to the site believe where there's smoke, there's fire. The drug company asked the Quebec Superior Court to shut the site down and order Phaneuf to pay $100,000 in damages for slander and violating the privacy of Wyeth Arist executives by posting their email addresses. The case was dismissed, and Phaneuf promptly updated her website with all the new material generated by the legal proceedings. Savage. You see, this woman was a fucking corporate cowboy about it. Sure, she aired it out to the public. It's not like she used it to leverage her way into another corporation and beat Wyeth Arist into the fucking ground and bury it 6 feet. But, you know, something is better than nothing. The power shift is so pronounced that even unreasonable, marginal employees can reach an audience and cause PR headaches, perhaps sending a firm into a trust crisis. If they can do it, reasonable men and women can do much more. Oh yeah, reasonable corporate cowboys can do fuck tons. Knowledge is power, and employees have more of it. A memo to managers: get used to it. This is ultimately a good thing. Yo, that sounds about as gangster as that fool in Moscow. Memo to managers: get used to it. This is ultimately a good thing. This is the same kind of power that drives innovation and competitive advantage. Rather than fight or flee, engage and embrace. That is the end of chapter 4 of The Naked Corporation: How the Age of Transparency Will Revolutionize Business. Thank you very much for having joined me, Alex, as I read to you and commented on what we read together. I'll catch you next time. Thanks again.